Can you hear me okay? Today is March the 8th. Depending on whether you are an optimist or pessimist, you may say happy or sad Women's Day. I'm an optimist, so I'll say Happy Women's Day. Okay, this is not my personal story. It's the story of Dr. Quinn Leslie. He's a resident in emergency department in Mount Sinai, New York. And this is a story of human resilience and perseverance. This physician went through medical school with bipolar disorder, and he's a psychiatry resident. I'm sure we all can find something in this story that will resonate with our own. Dr. Leslie writes, "The somber holiday weekend ended with an early morning ambulance ride down sleepy city streets toward an imposing concrete building. As the vehicle jostled my body to and fro, I tried to summon the energy to curse the psychiatrist whose signature ultimately sealed my fate. A hospital admission to protect me from myself. But I was exhausted from the mixed episode in which I had been drowning for past 3 days. I had been speaking much too rapidly, even for my normally quick tongue, and sleeping far too little to explain my body's unrelenting state of hyperarousal. I was so agitated and irritable that my parents did not speak to me, lest I snap at them for no good reason. As my mood shattered into 1,000 pieces, leaving me numb and questioning life, I begrudgingly accepted that I needed help. For 10 days of intense cognitive behavioral group therapy, I avoided the dilemma posed by simultaneously being a young healthcare professional and a person with bipolar disorder by pretending to be someone else entirely. However, upon my release, I could no longer hide. Returning to my everyday world would mean constantly being judged as two diametrically opposed forces. Like every third-year medical student, I spent weeks rotating on the inpatient psychiatric units and in the psychiatric emergency department of my school's hospital center, learning the clinical presentations and treatment modalities for mood, anxiety, and psychotic disorders. After hours upon hours of dedicated study, I earned the privilege to probe into my patients' personal lives to better understand their physical and psychological ailments. Still, I felt like something of a fraud, knowing exactly how it felt to be on the wrong side of CPEP, Comprehensive Psychiatric Emergency Program door. I had been merely a name and a diagnosis printed on a resident's handoff. My medical and social histories mirrored the mnemonics listed in every USMLE review book. It's United States Medical Licensing Examination. It's a series of exams that all physicians have to take, and I had to take them myself. I understood the sense of powerlessness that came with being involuntarily property searched and accompanied back and forth to the restroom. Dr. Leslie writes, I felt like Icarus flying too close to the sun, destined to tumble helplessly into the sea, unable to escape and destined to fall victim to an unforgiving fate. I thought that straddling the patient and physician sides of the medical world would be challenging, but I never expected it to nearly cripple me. So when he walked through the hospital doors as a senior medical student for the first time a year later, he says, I expected to adapt to an empathetic caretaker role effortlessly, having just been a patient myself. Instead, I kept my true character hidden behind my short white coat, desperate to portray only the admirable qualities of a level-headed physician. Support for a medical student with bipolar disorder was scarce, and I was still too insecure to dissociate my self-worth from someone else's bias. I grew incredibly ashamed of my diagnosis and convinced myself that I would become little more than a professional liability, never achieving the dream for which I had worked so hard and so long. Even my hodgepodge of medications and weekly psychotherapy sessions could not break through the wall that I had erected to protect myself from being seen as anything less than perfect, even if that meant losing myself in the process. I had basically given up my past experiences, secured under lock and key, until an insensitive comment about a patient with bipolar disorder kick-started the long process of self-acceptance into gear. And in this part, he explains a morning when he was working as an intern and he was asked to evaluate a cardiology patient for a psychiatric problem, where he says, I detected an air of cynicism in the caller's voice immediately. And then he was reviewing the patient's history, which listed a mood disorder, in addition to many medical maladies, and started to don on his metaphorical coat of armor when he overheard a voice supporting the use of chemical restraints on stable patients simply to avoid having to deal with crazy. By far, it was not the most offensive comment that I had heard, he says, was not profane or obscene, but he could barely digest the hateful words. Instead, he spun on his heels and ran back to the corridor, hiding his tears. He had been holding them for so long. He says, I never challenged this individual's remarks. I never reported the incident to the floor manager or the patient services representative. I never revealed how uncomfortable I felt as a result of only a few thoughtless words. He shied away from a legitimate confrontation so he could continue to hide behind a guise of normalcy. And he says, because I was afraid of becoming the target of someone else's arbitrary rage. Even now, he says, I can imagine myself as the butt of the joke, sending my self-esteem careening dangerously over the edge. Nevertheless, the fury generated from those words helped him to start to face his fears. He says, I finally committed to years of empty promises made in therapy, focused on myself, and learned to sidestep people who only saw me as a caricature of my disorder. Mood stabilizers helped erase the sting of accusations about my medical judgment for no other reason than because I had a mental illness. He says, when I let go of all the expectations of perfection, most significantly of my own, I recognized that my job was to practice medicine to the best of my ability, not to spend my career paralyzed by fear and shame. Even when I was emotionally exhausted and the scars on my arm taunted me with the memories of despair so deep that I preferred physical pain, I commended myself for persevering in spite of the battles I had faced, knowing that I had become more resilient because of them. Without realizing it, I matured into the empathetic physician I always hoped I would be. If nothing else, I would always understand how it felt to be sick and scared and just to need someone on your side. Today, almost halfway through residency and countless clinical interactions later, I still have mixed feelings about those last year of medical school. I wish I could say this was the only difficult situation that I faced in the 5 years I spent studying to become a physician. Unfortunately, I still have sad memories, some so heartbreaking that my eyes tear on cue. My roommates' infectious smiles and the encouraging words of my worried parents occasionally lifted my spirits when I had little faith. But more often than not, I did not believe that I would survive the journey. But over time, and with more help than I could repay in 1,000 lifetimes, fear and self-doubt blossomed into determination and tenacity. For the first time, I believed that my contributions were important, that my opinions mattered, and that I was not worthless. My journey is far from over, he says. There will undoubtedly be more bumps and chasms in the roads, just like for all of us. But for now, he says, I can confidently say that I'm a physician who has bipolar disorder, and though I'm far from being perfect, I'm good enough. Thank you.